Okay, so this is one of my favorite Dudaei Reuvens because it's always bothered me a specific Rashi on the Torah, and I love the Dudaei Reuven's explanation of it. The specific Rashi that bothers me is that when Yosef meets Yaakov for the first time, it says, excuse me for 1 second. When Yosef meets Yaakov for the first time, it says that Yosef makes his chariot and he goes up to greet his father at Goshen. Vayera, he appears to him. Vayipol tzavarav, and he falls on his neck, or in the plural. Vayev kal tzavarav od. And he appeared to him, and he fell on his neck, and he cried on his neck excessively. So what is going on here? So Rashi tells us, first of all, it means that he was excessively weeping. That Jacob was excessively weeping. Aval Yaakov lo nafal tzavarei Yosef. But Jacob was not crying. Yosef was crying excessively, but Jacob was not crying. V'lo nishako, nor did he kiss him. V'amru rabosenu shayakore es Shema. Our rabbis taught that at that moment, Jacob was reciting the Shema. So the Dudaei Reuven quotes this Rashi, but he quotes it straight from the Gemara, and he says, I don't understand. He says, this is the only time that he had to recite the Shema. He said, what do you mean? That there were no other times that he could recite the Shema? This is the only moment? And if that's the case, that this was the best moment to recite the Shema, why was Joseph not reciting the Shema? He hasn't seen his son in over 2 decades. Finally sees his son. Instead of showing any emotion, he recites the Shema. And Joseph, why wasn't he reciting the Shema then? So the Dudaei Reuven says, well, maybe you could say that Joseph felt he didn't have to recite the Shema because he was involved in a mitzvah, the mitzvah of honoring his father. And if you're involved in a mitzvah, you're exempt from a different mitzvah. But the Dudaei Reuven says, I don't accept that answer. Why? Because Jacob also was giving honor to kings, and he understood that that was a mitzvah, and Joseph was a king. And so therefore, he should have given him honor, as it states in Vayigash, that Jacob lifted himself up and sat on the bed. And so Rashi says that Jacob said, even though he's my son, I'll give him honor. By the way, I want to point out that there's a story about the Maharam of Rothenburg that he was very uncomfortable because he was a great rabbi and his father felt that it was his responsibility to stand up and give him honor. So, but the Maharam said it's not okay for my father to have to stand up to give me honor. But the Maharam's father said, I insist on standing up and giving you honor. So the Maharam said, but I insist that you can. So the only way they could deal with this situation was he never allowed himself to go into the room where his father was because he didn't want to make his father stand up. Maharam of Rothenburg was known for these extreme decisions that he was taken captive and he refused to allow himself to be ransomed. He refused to allow himself to be ransomed because he felt that would drive up the price and it would encourage more people to be taken prisoner. So, okay, so back to the Dudaei Reuven. So Rashi, so if that's the case, if Jacob had to give honor to his son, even in the privacy of his own home, for sure in public, he should have had to give honor to his son. So why at that moment did Yaakov not embrace Yosef? Why at that moment was he reciting the Shema? This is the question that the Dudaei Reuven asks. And so then he says to Dudaei Reuven, we have to understand properly this concept of the Shema of Jacob. What does it mean to have this Shema of Jacob? So he said, why couldn't they have said it earlier? Yaakov could have said the Shema a little earlier, and then he could have had the opportunity to rejoice with his son. Why at that exact moment did he have to recite the Shema? And why was Yosef not doing it? So therefore, this is what the Dudaei Reuven says. Says the Dudaei Reuven, the Torah obligates us to recite the Shema in the morning and in the evening. B'shach b'chav kumecha. The Shema represents two aspects. The main aspect of the Shema is Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shemayim. Shema means, when you recite the Shema, means you accept heaven upon yourself. You're accepting the yoke of heaven upon yourself. And the clear implication of accepting the yoke of heaven is to have the strength to stand through all the challenges of life. To have these challenges, to say no matter what Hashem challenges me with in life, I recognize that Hashem is my master, my creator. I accept upon myself the yoke of heaven. Now says the Dudaei Reuven, there are shnei nisyonos yeshnam l'adam v'chayim. There are two main challenges that a person faces in life. The first is, and he says, this is what Shlomo HaMelech said. And he says, don't give me poverty or wealth, lest I become, if you're giving me wealth, then what's going to happen is I'll become too satisfied and I will reject you. Or if you give me poverty, then perhaps I will steal. So Shlomo HaMelech said, don't make me rich and don't make me poor. I just want to be middle of the road. Says the Dudaei Reuven, the Shema of the morning and the era and the evening represent these two tests. The Torah obligates us to recite the Shema, to accept the yoke of heaven in the morning. Yes, we have to do it halachically, legally, technically every morning, but what this means is this symbolizes at the time when a person's sun is shining brightly, when the sun is shining forth on our life, when we have the test of wealth, when we have the test of success, and so too a person is obligated to recite the Shema in the evening. That is when the world is, God forbid, dark for us. And that's the test of poverty, meaning to say the test that when we're tested with success and when we're tested with failure. And Hashem will test all of us with this. And so at both of those moments, we have to recite the Shema of success, to accept God when we're successful, and the Shema of failure, to accept God when it's not working out the way we intended. And for these two tests, a person has to overcome his inclination to strengthen himself in order to fulfill the Torah. And that's what David HaMelech said, to recite in the morning your kindnesses, and your sureties at the night, meaning to say when a person is successful, God forbid a person shouldn't say, that my strength, my energy, my personal brilliance is what made this tremendous success. But rather, a person needs to be completely recognizing that everything comes from the kindness of Hashem. And Hashem was what allowed us to reach the level that we're at. And at night, at a time when a person's soul is faint from the struggles that they're going through, and he doesn't see any blessing in his work, and he thinks his life is not working out the right way, God forbid should a person give up and lose hope, but rather he needs to strengthen himself with the faith in the salvation of Hashem. Like the Alter Rebbe said at the very beginning of our discussion, you have to say not what I need, but where does Hashem need me? What does Hashem need from me? So the Midrash it says, when it says, wherever it says, wherever a person walks, the divine presence goes with them, that's a reference to Joseph. Means to say that Joseph was the person who was challenged tremendously. Joseph was challenged both in failure and in success. He was challenged when he was in the pit. He was challenged when he was in the prison. He was challenged when he was a slave in Potiphar's house. And now he was challenged with the challenge of wealth. That now he had the challenge of wealth, meaning to say he was the number 2 in the land of Egypt, to Moshe B'Kol Eretz Mitzrayim. He was the ruler. He went from the prison to be the king. And so therefore, and we know that the Egyptians hated the Ivrim, as it says, they couldn't even eat with them. And nevertheless, Joseph overcame that challenge. He could have denied who his brothers were, but just the opposite. He brought his brothers to his house. He ate with them. And he cooked for them. He prepared the food. He slaughtered the meat properly, and he guarded the Torah and the mitzvahs just like he used to do in his father's home. And he says, "Elokim ani yareh," I fear Hashem. And the Torah says this, that Joseph was Mitzrayim, Yosef Ayaba Mitzrayim. That is Joseph, just like even when he was a king in Egypt, he was the same Joseph who was a slave. So he was the same Joseph who was in his father's home. So Joseph was the paradigm of somebody who could overcome the test of failure, the test of struggles, and the test of success, the challenge of failing and the challenge of succeeding. Both are tremendous challenges. So about Yosef, we could clearly say, with a very clear expression, he recited the Shema in the morning and in the evening. That he recited it at both times, because his life was clearly filled with both extremes, the extreme of success and the extreme of failure. In both of these cases, Joseph succeeded, and he accepted upon himself the yoke of heaven. In contrast to this, says the Dudaei, Reuven was Jacob. Jacob, up until his meeting with Joseph, his life was very hard. As he says to Pharaoh, the days of my life are being few and hard. That's what it says. What did Jacob do? He had all his days, he had known just pain. He had been pursued by his brother Esau. He served for 22 years, his father-in-law, and his father-in-law changed his wages 10 times. And after all that, what did he do? He lived with the loss of his son Joseph. And the Midrash says, to describe Joseph's life, Lo shalavti me Esav, lo shekadati me Lavan, lo nachti midina v'yavo roges mi Yosef. He had the problems of Esav, the problems of Lavan, the problems of Dinah, and then he had the turmoil of Joseph. Yaakov's life was bitter. Yaakov's life was hard. So, of course, about Yaakov, you could say, up until this point, he had only recited the Shema of the evening. And Chazal say, Yaakov, for this reason, is associated with instituting the evening prayer service. The Shema of the evening, the Shema of what do we do when it's tough, when the days are dark, when the world is hard. Yaakov Avinu had overcome until now the test of poverty, the test of being afflicted. And his whole life he had been afflicted. And that's why Jacob says to Paro, Yemei Shnei Migurai Ma'at Viraim Hayu. The days of my life are few and bad. And about this, Rashi quotes, the Rashi says, Vayeshev Yaakov, Bikesh Yaakov Vayeshev B'Shalva. Yaakov wanted one moment of tranquility in this world, but he wasn't going to get it. Yaakov didn't get one moment of tranquility. But once Jacob came to Egypt, well, how is he coming to Egypt? He comes with the wagons of the king that Pharaoh had sent him. And Joseph, his son, gave him honor. And who was his son, Joseph? He was the Moshel B'Kol Eretz Mitzrayim. He was the ruler. Then Jacob finally, it says, Vayichi Yaakov Eretz Mitzrayim. Jacob lived in the land of Egypt. These days were for Jacob days of tranquility, nachas, and wealth. Finally, he was able to live out his golden years. Then it came to him for the first time in his life. Finally, when he sees Joseph, finally he makes it. Finally, he has the challenge, not of the failures, not of the struggles, not of the turmoils, but finally, the challenge of success. And so therefore, after 22 years where he didn't see Joseph, and it comes along and he sees Joseph, who greets him with the presidential motorcade, with his carriage, which is the carriage of the king. And he realizes now that he has a new stage in his life, the stage of wealth, this stage of success. Therefore, Yaakov recites the Shema. And what is the Shema? He says, up until now, I've accepted the yoke of heaven when I was struggling. But now I want to accept the yoke of heaven when I succeed. And that's what Yaakov Avinu was saying. And this is the big challenge, the biggest challenge for the Jewish people is not only the challenge of struggle, of turmoil, but it's also the struggle of tranquility. Will we succeed with our mission when we have wealth, when we have success? That's the message of the Dudaei Reuven. And that's why he says Yaakov at that moment recited the Shema. That's why he said Yaakov at that moment recited the Shema. So I just want to summarize what we said so far today. We said three things. First of all, we talked about, Yosef says to his brothers, Al te'atzvu, do not be sad. Why is he telling them not to be sad? Because he says, don't blame yourself for sending me here, because I was sent here by Hashem. And he said the story of the person who went to the Alter Rebbe and he said, I need my money so that I can pay off my debts and then I'll be okay. And the Alter Rebbe said, stop talking about what you need, talk about where you're needed. Then we said the story of Bnei Dan and Chushim, that why is the son of Dan called Chushim? Because from this one person, he could accomplish so many things. From this one person, so many things could come out. So if you discover why you're needed, imagine what good you could do in this world. From that one person could be flowering generations and generations. The sons of Dan are Chushim. And then we came to Yaakov Avinu reciting the Shema. In his moments of success, Yaakov Avinu recognizes that he has a new test in life, the challenge of being committed to Hashem even in the greatest moments of success, accepting the yoke of heaven and succeeding. That's the message of Yaakov Avinu in reciting the Shema at this moment. Okay, I want to stop here, see if anybody has any questions. I'm happy to address.